Hi friends, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, I'm Holly. Welcome. Today I'm sharing with you a sugar cookie recipe for Easter, and these are like the little bunny Peeps, like the little marshmallow ones. So that's what I'm going to try to make today. You will need 2½ cups of all-purpose flour, 1 cup of granulated sugar, 1½ teaspoons of vanilla extract, 3/4 teaspoon of baking powder, and a 3/4 teaspoon of salt, 1 cup of unsalted butter softened, and 1 large egg. For the frosting, you will need 3 cups of powdered sugar, ½ teaspoon of vanilla extract, 2 tablespoons of light corn syrup, 3 to 4 tablespoons of milk. You will also need some sanding sugar, so the colors of the Peeps: yellow, pink, blue, and purple. A bunny cookie cutter that looks like a peep. And I'm using this chocolate icing. You can, when you make the frosting, you can take some of that out and color it brown or black, but I chose just to go to the easy route and just do this and buy that already made. And just make sure when you're getting the sugar that it says sanding sugar. It has more of a finer texture to it. Some other sugars are a little bit chunkier, so that just has a smoother, finer texture. But now I'm going to show you how easy this is to make. So the first thing you will need to do is make the cookie dough. With this, you will need 1 cup or 2 sticks of unsalted butter, and you want to make sure that that is softened. Add the granulated sugar, and then I mix this with the mixer, and you want to have a creamy texture, so you're just creaming that together. Add the egg and the vanilla extract, and then just continue to mix this until, like I said, you get a creamy texture. Now add the all-purpose flour to another bowl. Add in the baking powder and the salt, and I like to mix that together a little bit, and then just add it to your flour, and then whisk it until it's completely combined. Now you will gradually add the flour to the creamed butter until the flour is gone. So I just take a little, about ½ cup or so, and just continue to add until it completely gets mixed in, and then there will be no more flour left. You won't see any flour in the bowl at all. It'll all be combined. Now you will divide the dough in half, and it says to use saran wrap. I didn't have any left. I do need to put that on my grocery list, so I'm using Ziploc bags instead. So just take half and you're going to roll it into like a little disc, not a ball but a disc, so it'll be a little bit flatter, a round flat shape. And I ended up, will be a little larger than the other, but not by much. And it's not sticky. That was one thing I liked about this. The dough was not sticky at all. So just form, like I said, a disc, and I'm just trying to show you there that it's not sticky. And once you get that disc formed, put it in your Ziploc bag, and you will put this in the refrigerator either for at least 3 hours or overnight. I ended up leaving mine in the refrigerator overnight because I could not get to this right away. So when you do that, it's going to take a little longer when you want to get ready to cook this. So I'll show you that in just a second. And if you are using a Ziploc bag, just try to make sure to get all the air that's in there out. Once your dough has chilled, either for a few hours or overnight, then you will roll it out into about 1/4 of an inch thickness. And I do use a little bit of flour on the bottom to roll this out. And if you did let it sit in the refrigerator overnight, you want to let it sit out for about 20 minutes, so that way it's a little bit easier to roll, because it will be kind of thick. Then take the cookie cutter and just make as many bunny cutouts as you can. with the dough that you've rolled out. Now, this is just one of the half of the dough that I'm using. And then I just pull away the rest of that dough. And it's easy to do because the dough's still chilled somewhat, because once it starts getting to room temperature, then it gets a little harder. So you always want to make sure the dough is somewhat cool as you're doing that. Off camera, I have a parchment paper lined cookie sheet, and that's where these cookies are going onto. Make sure that your oven is preheated to 350 because you want to get these in as soon as you can, and just kind of space them. They're not supposed to spread, so space them about 2 inches or so apart. That way they'll be easier to take off of the cookie sheet. And before you start to ice in the cookies, you want to make sure that you have the sugar and everything already out. So I have these little containers that I put the whole jar of the standing sugar in, and I will just put all of that back into the containers once I'm done. But you want to make sure it's big enough to put those cookies in, because the cookies are long. So just make sure it's in a container that you can ice in this. But if you had, like, the purple container would be better, just because it condenses that sugar a little bit better. It makes it a little bit deeper, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. But make sure that you have your sugar already laid out. And I waited a couple of minutes and then put these cookies on a cooling rack and let those cool completely before going on to the next step, which will be to ice in the cookies. For the icing, add the 3 cups of powdered sugar to a bowl, and then start adding the milk, a tablespoon, about 2 tablespoons. Mix it in, and you will just continue to add the milk until you feel like you have had the consistency that you want. Then add the vanilla extract. Continue to stir it, and I changed from that whisk to a spoon because it was a lot easier. I felt like it needed a little bit more milk, so I just added a little bit more of what I had left. Now I add the corn syrup, and then you want to just mix this. And when you lift up the icing and let it drizzle down, like in ribbons, you want it to hold its shape for about 2 seconds or so before it melts back into the icing. Then take a pastry bag and put the coupler inside, and then you will just cut that little tip off. And then it calls for a number 5 tip, which I know I have somewhere but cannot find it. But I'm using a number 4, which worked out fine. It just needs to be a thin line that you're going to make. So just make sure you have that tightened. Then what I do is I fold the bag down to the line where the fill line is, because you don't want to overfill it. Then I put this in a glass, and then I will fill it up with the icing, and that just makes it a lot easier to do. Then take your icing and just trace around the bunny cookie. And you can't get much easier than that. And if you find that the icing is too thin, you can add a little bit more powdered sugar to the mixture. I'm not sure. It was a bit hot in my kitchen because of the oven and everything, and I just felt like things were melting a little bit too fast. So I could have added just a little bit more powdered sugar to it, but I didn't want to make it too thick either. So technically this worked out. Then once you fill in the inside of the cookie, take the toothpick and just spread it to the edges. And you want to just make sure that the inside of the cookie is completely covered with the icing. And the way the recipe said to do this was to sort of drop it into the sugar and then just shake up the container with the sugar, and that should spread the sugar on the cookie. I didn't like how that turned out because I felt like it was spreading the icing a little too much. So that one, I mean, it looks like a Peep, but I didn't like how the icing looked. So for the next one, I kind of pressed it in a little bit lightly like a stamp. And you can see I felt like that worked out a little bit better. It didn't mess up the icing like the other one did. So then I continue to trace more of the cookies and fill them in. And you want to do one cookie at a time, because that icing, you don't want to do a bunch and then the icing starts to set up. It won't let the sugar stick to it. So just do one at a time. And that toothpick works great for little mishaps. So I'll show you in a little bit what I did with that. But then I just dipped it into the next color. Like I said, just lightly do that and it should cover it without any problems. But you can see the icing was melting a little bit, so I just took the toothpick and just traced around and took the excess off, and that worked pretty good. But that's why I think if the icing was a little bit thicker, it wouldn't have melted as much. But I'm not really sure. But I think they turned out pretty cute, considering. And as you're putting the icing around the cookie, tracing it, don't put it all the way to the edge. You want to make sure it's more towards the inner part of the cookie. If that makes sense, don't put it directly on the edge of the cookie, because it says it would make a bigger mess than what I'm making right now. So this is, like I said, that toothpick works great just to kind of clean everything up. And I was going to try to cover the rest of that white spots that were showing by dipping it back in, but I decided to use a spoon. And I just sprinkled it over those areas, and I wish I would have thought to do that earlier. It would have made it a lot simpler than trying to dip it back into the sugar. I mean, it makes it a little messy, but I still think they turned out pretty good. Now, to make the eyes and the nose, I'm going to use this icing that I have, and I make sure that I cut the smallest possible dimension on there. So make sure it's the smallest tip, the very end of it. And then just put your eyes and your nose, and this comes out pretty quickly. But this is what they look like when they're done. I think they look like Peeps, and I think they look cute. It's just a fun little cookie to make, and like I said, they're not perfect. They're a little messy, some of them. Like I said, that icing just wanted to melt on me. My kitchen was just a little too hot. But really cute little idea for Easter if you decide you want to make these. I'm going to leave the recipe link down below. I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in seeing more like it, please click that subscribe button and the notification bell, and that will notify you when I post new videos. I hope everyone has a blessed day. Thank y'all so much for watching. God bless y'all.